Hi everyone, it's Aaron, and this is what you could call my wrap up, I guess, but I'm not all that fast of a reader, so just more what I've read recently. And I'll start off with one off of my sci fi list that I'm able to off now. It is Ursula K. The Left Hand of Darkness. This was a very fascinating story. It is a story about the main character. His name is Genli I, and he is a ambassador for a human federation that is reconnecting with different pockets of human civilization or colonization that was from a previous time of human expansion. Um, and so these are pockets of humanity that have been out of touch for a long time and have actually changed genetically. And this planet that he is at, called Winter, is a society of humans where they actually have developed a mating cycle. And so once a month, these, what are for most of the month are gender neutral individuals, will have intense feelings of mating and will partner up. One will become a male, one will become a female, and they will mate for several days straight, and generally resulting in a pregnancy. And so this is Genli I trying to navigate a world that is very foreign to him in its culture and its people itself, but then also trying to convince them that he is not only an alien, but also from a federation that wants to initiate trade with these people. And it is a very human story in a very fantastical but very real world. And so I understand why this won a Hugo Award. Definitely, it's definitely a fascinating character story, and I was very impressed with it. Very glad I read this one. The next one I read was actually on my list as well, and it is Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. This one again, not a traditional science fiction like I'm used to, but it is on my list still, and I understand why. It is a very believable sort of dystopian, I guess you could say, a society that is very controlled by religion and a patriarchy of a select few, and for justification is religion that is used for the enforcement of the society. And this is about people that are living, who have lived through the transition, who remember the old way things were. And it's told from the perspective of a woman who remembers having a job, who remembers the day that her bank account stopped working, um, and is now a handmaid, which apparently it didn't explain it too much, but there's a population crisis. But as well, this patriarchy decides who is allowed to breed, but the young, fertile women are chosen to be handmaidens, and that's essentially to be assigned to be breeding stock for these select men who have been deemed worthy through this theocracy of some form. However, they rose to power. It doesn't actually explain it because it very much stays to this woman's individual level and her daily routine, and is a very fascinating story. And I I would recommend this for anyone to read, but it is very difficult at certain times because it is hard for me to, not sure how to put this, empathizing with people that are subject to other people's power. And it is not, it is just done very well, so well to the point where it makes you uncomfortable. But I love it because it makes you feel that way. It gives you that great feeling of uncomfortableness because something's so believable almost. Or you could, it's not so far-fetched to see it happening. And unfortunately, that's where I end up on it. But very good read. Very good read. I recommend it to just about anyone who can handle that kind of subject matter. All right, and the next one I went on to was classic Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I'm glad I finally got to this one. What actually triggered me to read this is I watched the Daniel Radcliffe Victor Frankenstein movie and decided, it's time I read the original source material, and I'm so glad I did because this is a wonderful story, a wonderful, wonderful tale about narcissists, really. People that are full of themselves, have victim complexes, and are destroyed by their own arrogance. And they always talk about Frankenstein and the monster, but everyone is a monster in this movie, or in the movie, goodness gracious. In this book, in this story, everyone is a monster. I don't know why I was so turned off by this because it was a classic, but I'm glad I'm going back and doing some reading on the classics because there's a reason that they're classics. And so I'm glad I did Frankenstein. I want to do Dracula here soon, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is on my list as well. So ready to move on to those at some point. But Frankenstein is great. Great story of people and their own demons, and we make our own monsters. Love it. Another classic here is Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. Again, so glad I read this one. This is such a human story. The main character, Billy Pilgrim, is incredibly relatable in just everyone's, I think, feeling of apathy with the world at some times and the people around you. But this story is about Billy Pilgrim, and he is unstuck in time. And so he visits different parts of his life. He does not control it, but he flows back and forth to times when he's a baby and he just hears his mother talking to him while she holds him, to the moments before his death and everywhere in between. There's also an alien abduction crux to this as well, which is highly fascinating. This is just an amazing story, and it's Kurt Vonnegut's probably most well-known work, and there's a reason why, and it's because it just you could see yourself as Billy Pilgrim, but also he goes through many fascinating circumstances, but some very believable too. And so you see a lot of yourself in Billy Pilgrim. And it makes you connect with this story so much, even with its fantastical elements. And then I reread my favorite book of all time, and this is Dune, Frank Herbert. I know it seems a little cliche, but I love this book. I love this story. I have only read this one so far, but I have been at my local bookstore slowly collecting the sequels. I haven't found Dune Messiah yet, which is the next one after this, but I have found the next two that come right after 3 and 4. Dune is the number one, the top book on my sci-fi list, and I do not disagree with that at all. This is a story of high society and intrigue in a fantasy sci-fi setting. And to put it in an interesting way, this is almost like the hipster Game of Thrones, because it was written so much longer before Game of Thrones, but the elements are so much the same, and you love love this story for the same reasons that you would love Game of Thrones, because you have the multiple perspectives, you have the people in different forms of power always scheming, the people that are lower trying to get to the top, the people at the top trying to stay on top, traps in politics and seeing the traps. Can you avoid the traps? As well, there are just some great world pieces in here. The Bene Gesserit sisterhood I find incredibly fascinating, and their prophecy and mysticism in human genetics and interbreeding, and having a sort of prophecy and religious angle to this sort of grand genetic scheme. And the Spacer Guild, you don't learn much about them in this first one, but they are very fascinating. And the Atreides family, of course. The Duke Leto is an incredible character, and he stays with you so much. And of course, Paul the son, of course, the protagonist of this story. But I do love Leto very much, and just that first initial family of Paul, Jessica, and Leto, and their adventure that they go on, and the bonds that they have. This story is just so nostalgic for me as well, because I saw the David Lynch movie as a younger child, and I read this originally as a teenager. And so the characters have been with me for a large portion of my life, and to reread it again was just it was heartwarming almost. It was heartwarming, and to just feel the emotions of these characters, because they do just feel like my family. And so if you haven't read Dune, and you appreciate science fiction, you need to read this one. It is the best story ever written. And that's all I'll gush about that. And so that wraps up my recently reads, or wrap up. Go ahead and please give me some comments below, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.